Ever catch yourself thinking about, like inspiring the next generation?
Yeah.
Being that person in the classroom who helps the student finally have that aha moment.
It's amazing.
Well, that's what we're diving into today. Secondary school teaching assistants.
Right.
We dug into RoleCatcher,
Hmm.
and honestly, the impact these folks have is pretty remarkable.
It really is. There's this misconception that it's all about, worksheets and keeping everyone quiet.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's so much deeper than that. We're talking
Yeah.
about shaping young minds, being that link between a student and the teacher.
So, paint me a picture. What's a typical day even look like for a secondary school teaching assistant?
Okay, so picture this. You walk into a classroom, right? And they're about to dive into Shakespeare.
Okay.
But instead of just rows of desks, you've helped the teacher set up this incredible virtual reality experience.
Wow,
Students are immersed, walking through a 3D globe theater.
that's amazing.
As a teaching assistant, you might be the one making sure the tech works, guiding students through the simulation, or even working one-on-one with someone who needs a little extra help understanding the language.
So it sounds like being tech savvy is becoming a big deal in this role.
It's essential. These days, it's not just about knowing the subject, it's about being comfortable with those interactive whiteboards, the educational apps, even AI-powered learning platforms. Think about it. A teaching assistant might need to show a student how to use a research database and then help them build a website all in one day.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like they're right there on the front lines of bringing education into the future. With all this tech, how does RoleCatcher say teaching assistants are making a difference in the classroom? What are the less obvious perks of this career path?
One of the coolest things I found on RoleCatcher was this concept of learning differentiation. Basically, technology empowers teaching assistants to provide really personalized support.
Yeah, interesting.
Imagine helping a student with dyslexia access audiobooks, creating custom quizzes based on their progress, or even using AI to find and address those learning gaps right away.
So each student is getting a learning experience tailored to them.
Exactly.
And that's possible because the teaching assistant bridges the gap between technology and individual needs.
You got it. It's not just about fetching things. It's about giving students the tools to learn in ways they never thought possible. And that actually leads us to one of the most rewarding but also challenging parts of this job: the relationships you build. Teaching assistants aren't just working with technology. They're working with young people who are going through all the ups and downs of adolescence. You're right there with them. You're navigating friendship drama, dealing with those I don't want to be here days.
Yeah, tough.
And sometimes you become that adult a student feels like they can actually talk to. RoleCatcher even mentioned this study about how much those relationships with teaching assistants matter, especially for students who are struggling.
It shows just how human this role really is. But we've got to address let's say, the elephant in the room.
Oh, yeah.
The pay for teaching assistants isn't always, ideal.
True. You're definitely in it for the passion, that's for sure. The money doesn't always show how important this work is. Though RoleCatcher's data did point out that experience, maybe some extra certifications, can boost what you can earn.
So there's room to grow, even if those starting salaries are a little,
Totally. And that actually brings us to the career ladder. Because starting as a teaching assistant, it doesn't mean you're stuck there.
Okay, right.
RoleCatcher laid out a pretty clear progression. You can get more responsibility, even leadership roles.
So walk me through it. What are those next steps a teaching assistant could go for?
Okay, imagine you've been a teaching assistant for a couple years, you've learned the ropes. A natural next step might be a senior teaching assistant position.
And what's that like day to day? More responsibility.
You're not just assisting anymore, you're leading. Remember, we talked about making learning work for each student. A senior teaching assistant might be the one creating those individual plans. They might even lead small groups, especially where students need that extra help, like math or reading.
So it's way more hands-on, almost like co-teaching.
Exactly. And usually that means you're more involved in parent-teacher conferences, too. RoleCatcher had this great example: a senior teaching assistant explaining a student's IEP, that's the Individualized Education Program, to their parents and working with them to set goals.
That's a big deal.
Mhm.
So those responsibilities just keep growing as you move up that ladder.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about that top row, the lead teaching assistant. This is where it gets really interesting.
All right, I'm all ears. What kind of impact does a lead teaching assistant even have?
Think of them like the conductor of an orchestra, but for the classroom. They're not just helping one student, they're supporting the whole learning environment. RoleCatcher talked about how they often help create the curriculum, mentor new teaching assistants, even look at student data to see what's working and what's not.
Wow, so they have a say in how all the students in their school learn. That's some serious influence.
For sure. They bridge that gap between teachers, administrators, and students. And because they're often the ones using new technology, new teaching methods, they're often leading the way in education, which is pretty cool.
This whole journey from being that helping hand in class to potentially changing how we think about education is pretty inspiring.
It really is. And it all begins with that passion for helping students do their best. But of course, passion alone won't get you the job.
Right.
So for those listening who are thinking, hey, that's me, let's talk about what it really takes to get started in this field.
What are we talking about here? What skills and qualifications do you absolutely need if you want to be a teaching assistant?
Well, loving to learn and genuinely wanting to work with young people, those are must-haves.
Of course, yeah.
But you'll also need some specific skills to really do well. RoleCatcher really stresses communication.
Makes sense, right? You're talking to students, teachers, parents.
Yeah.
That's a lot of different people.
Exactly. And it's not just talking clearly, it's about listening, changing how you communicate depending on who you're talking to.
Right.
Maybe even knowing how to calm things down if two kids are arguing about who knows what.
Conflict resolution. Got it. And patience, too, I bet. That's got to be up there.
Huge. RoleCatcher actually points out that teaching assistants often work with students who have learning disabilities, maybe some behavioral issues, or they're just having a bad day.
Yeah.
Being able to stay calm, patient, and positive in those situations, that's super important.
Sounds like you need to be pretty resilient, too.
Absolutely. But we can't forget creativity. Remember those cool lessons we talked about?
Yeah.
The VR Globe Theater?
Yeah.
A great teaching assistant brings that creative spark to the classroom, whether it's coming up with a fun activity or explaining something tricky in a new way.
So you're not just helping the teacher with their ideas, you're bringing your own thing to the table.
Exactly. Which leads us to that other big step, the interview. Because even with all the passion and skills, you still have to nail that conversation to get the job.
Let's be real. Interviews can be scary. What kind of questions should you be ready for?
Well, be prepared to talk about your experience working with young people.
Okay.
Your classroom management style, how you handle tough behavior, those are classics. RoleCatcher actually has a whole section just for interview prep. They even have these AI-powered practice sessions. You can record yourself answering questions and get feedback.
Wait, seriously.
Yeah.
That's incredible. It's like having a personal interview coach right there on your phone.
Right. It can really boost your confidence for the real deal.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening. We started picturing a teaching assistant quietly grading papers, but they're actually tech-savvy, creative, resilient people who are shaping young minds.
It's a job that doesn't always get the attention it deserves.
Right.
But what they do for students, teachers, and the future of education, it's really something special.
As we wrap up here, I think the biggest takeaway is, for anyone who's ever felt that pull toward inspiring the next generation,
Absolutely.
don't underestimate being a teaching assistant.
Yeah.
It could be that perfect start to a really fulfilling, impactful career. Who knows? You might be the one who comes up with the next big thing in education.
I love it.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and don't forget to check out RoleCatcher for even more info on this awesome career path. We'll see you next time as we take another deep dive into the world of work.